muchachos, se están quemando aquí, dos camiones. Anden con cuidado, por favor.
Right now, with troops, the question on everyone's mind is simple. Does the government actually control this country, or do the cartels? Let me break down exactly what led to this moment, because understanding the trigger is essential to understanding why Mexico is burning right now. El Mencho had been the most wanted man in Mexico for over a decade. The United States offered a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture, the highest bounty ever placed on a Mexican drug lord. He survived multiple assassination attempts, evaded countless military operations, and built the CJNG from a regional faction into a transnational criminal empire operating in all 32 Mexican states and over 50 countries worldwide. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the CJNG controls an estimated 35% of the illegal drug trade entering the United States, with annual revenues exceeding $20 billion. El Mencho wasn't just a cartel leader. He was the architect of one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in modern history. On February 22nd, Mexican intelligence received actionable information about El Mencho's location in Tlajomulco, a municipality in the Guadalajara metropolitan area. President Claudia Sheinbaum authorized an immediate military operation. Elite special forces, supported by helicopter gunships and armored vehicles, moved in at dawn. According to official reports, El Mencho's security team opened fire immediately, triggering a 90-minute firefight that left the cartel leader and at least 8 of his bodyguards dead. Mexican authorities recovered high-caliber weapons, encrypted communication devices, and evidence suggesting El Mencho had been coordinating operations from the safe house. President Sheinbaum addressed the nation that evening, calling his death a significant victory in Mexico's fight against organized crime, and promising that security forces would remain vigilant against potential retaliation. Those words would prove tragically insufficient. Now, comment what you think about whether killing El Mencho was actually a victory, or if it just opened Pandora's box, because what happened next suggests the government seriously underestimated what they were dealing with. The revenge attacks began within 2 hours of the official announcement. The first reports came from Guadalajara, where masked gunmen hijacked public buses, forced passengers off at gunpoint, and set the vehicles ablaze in major intersections across the city. By 8 p.m. local time on February 22nd, at least 15 burning vehicles were blocking traffic in Guadalajara alone. But Guadalajara was just the opening move. Within the next hour, similar attacks erupted simultaneously in Puerto Vallarta, Zapopan, Tlaquepaque, Tonalá, and Chapala. Then the pattern spread beyond Jalisco. Reports flooded in from Guanajuato, where gunmen torched vehicles on Highway 45. From Michoacán, the chaos. Cars crashing into burning wreckage. People suffering heart attacks while fleeing. A mother and her 2 children dying from smoke inhalation when they became trapped between 2 burning buses on the Guadalajara-Tepic Highway. Beyond the fatalities, over 120 people have been hospitalized with injuries ranging from severe burns to gunshot wounds. Emergency rooms across Jalisco, Guanajuato, and Michoacán are overwhelmed. Doctors are working double shifts. Blood banks are running low. And the psychological trauma, the terror that ordinary families are experiencing right now, is incalculable. Emergency services across affected states have completely collapsed under the pressure. Firefighters are responding to dozens of simultaneous fires with insufficient equipment and personnel. In Guadalajara alone, the municipal fire department reported receiving over 200 emergency calls in the first 6 hours of the attacks. Ambulances are blocked by burning vehicles and cartel checkpoints, unable to reach victims in time. One paramedic in Zapopan told reporters this morning, "We've never seen anything like this. We're trained for emergencies, but this feels like a war zone. We can't get to people who need help because the roads are blocked and we're being threatened by armed men." Police forces, already stretched thin by years of cartel violence, are pinned down responding to reports across multiple municipalities simultaneously. The infrastructure that civilians depend on for protection and emergency response has failed, and people are terrified. And look, I know we're covering these events because they're breaking news and the scale is unprecedented. But let's not forget that real families are living through this terror right now, that ordinary people in Jalisco and across Mexico are trapped in a nightmare while the world watches, and behind every statistic is a human being just trying to survive. The Mexican government's response has been massive but inadequate. Within 12 hours of the first attacks, President Sheinbaum deployed an additional 5,000 federal troops and 2,500 National Guard personnel to Jalisco and surrounding states. As of today, February 25th, over 8,000 military personnel are patrolling affected areas. Armored convoys roll through Guadalajara's streets. Checkpoints have been established on every major highway in Jalisco. Helicopter gunships conduct surveillance flights over known CJNG strongholds. The visible militarization is unprecedented. Residents describe feeling like they're living under martial law. But even with this overwhelming military presence, the attacks haven't completely stopped. Yesterday, February 24th, the CJNG conducted smaller-scale strikes in residential neighborhoods across Guadalajara, burning cars, shooting at military patrols, and leaving narco banners with direct threats to government officials. The cartel is making it clear that they can sustain this campaign indefinitely. The evidence linking these attacks directly to the CJNG is overwhelming. At multiple sites, cartel operatives left banners, narco mantas, with messages in Spanish that translate to, "This is what happens when you touch our leader. El Mencho is gone, but the CJNG is eternal. We are everywhere. This is just the beginning." Some banners directly threatened President Sheinbaum and Jalisco Governor Enrique Alfaro by name. Others warned rival cartels not to attempt to move into CJNG territory during the transition. Mexican intelligence has confirmed that the orders came from the cartel's top command structure, specifically from Ricardo Ruiz Velasco, known as El Double R, who is now believed to be positioning himself as El Mencho's successor. Intercepted communications analyzed by federal investigators reveal that the attacks were planned months in advance as a contingency protocol, a doomsday plan to be activated if El Mencho was ever killed or captured. But these attacks weren't just about revenge, they were also about power consolidation. With El Mencho dead, there's now a massive power vacuum at the top of the CJNG. Multiple factions within the organization are positioning to take control, and intelligence suggests that El Double R orchestrated these revenge attacks partly to demonstrate his strength and legitimacy as the new leader. By coordinating such a massive, multi-state operation, he's sending a message to other CJNG commanders. I'm in charge now, and I can deliver results. But this also means Mexico could be facing an internal war within the CJNG as different factions fight for control. A succession battle that could make the current violence look like a preview of something far worse. Comment what you think about whether the CJNG will fracture into warring factions or consolidate under new leadership, because that answer will determine Mexico's security situation for the next decade. The economic devastation is staggering and still unfolding. Mexico's economy has taken a direct hit that economists are comparing to a natural disaster. Initial estimates place the direct damage from destroyed infrastructure, burned vehicles, and looted businesses at over $400 million US, but that number doesn't account for the broader economic paralysis. Schools across Jalisco, Guanajuato, and Michoacán remain closed as of today. Over 2 million students unable to attend classes. Government offices have suspended operations in affected areas. Major corporations including Walmart, Coca-Cola, Bimbo, and FEMSA have halted distribution and closed facilities across western Mexico. The Guadalajara International Airport has seen mass flight cancellations. International carriers including United Airlines, Air Canada, Delta, and Aeromexico have suspended service to Puerto Vallarta and Guadalajara, citing security concerns. The Mexican Tourism Board estimates that the attacks will cost the tourism industry over $600 million in the first month alone as travelers cancel reservations and cruise lines reroute ships away from Mexican ports. And people are fleeing. Entire neighborhoods in Guadalajara have emptied out as families pack their belongings and leave for safer states. Bus terminals are overwhelmed with people trying to get out. Highways heading east toward Mexico City and south toward Oaxaca are jammed with cars loaded with luggage and children. Social media is flooded with posts from Jalisco residents asking if it's safe to return, if schools will reopen, if the violence is over. Many aren't waiting for answers. They're just leaving. Real estate agents in Guadalajara report that property inquiries have dropped 80% in the past 3 days, while agents in cities like Querétaro and San Miguel de Allende report surges in interest from families relocating from Jalisco. This is a mass displacement event driven by terror, and it's happening right now. The cleanup process is overwhelming and ongoing. Forensic teams are working around the clock to process crime scenes across 23 states. Burned bodies are being pulled from vehicles and transported to overcrowded morgues. Families are lining up at government offices trying to identify missing loved ones. Tow trucks are hauling away charred vehicle skeletons, leaving scorch marks on highways that will remain visible for months. Municipal workers are scrubbing graffiti, repairing damaged buildings, and trying to restore basic services. But many businesses won't reopen. Insurance companies are already denying claims, arguing that cartel violence constitutes an act of war not covered under standard policies. Small business owners who lost everything are facing bankruptcy. The physical scars of these attacks will heal slowly. The economic and psychological scars may never fully heal. The government's official response has been a combination of military action and damage control. President Sheinbaum held a press conference yesterday, February 24th, calling the attacks cowardly acts of terrorism committed by criminals who have no respect for human life. She vowed that those responsible would be brought to justice and announced the deployment of additional federal forces. Governor Alfaro declared a state of emergency in Jalisco and imposed a temporary curfew in Guadalajara and surrounding municipalities. As of this morning, Mexican authorities have arrested 47 people allegedly connected to the attacks, mostly low-level sicarios captured at blockade sites or identified through social media footage. But the CJNG's leadership remains untouched. LRR and the rest of the top command are still operating freely, likely already planning their next move. The arrests feel performative, the government projecting strength while knowing they can't reach the people actually calling the shots. Technology played a critical role in both the execution and exposure of these attacks. According to Mexican intelligence officials, the CJNG used encrypted messaging platforms including Signal and Telegram to coordinate the strikes across multiple states simultaneously. Witnesses reported seeing drones overhead during several blockades, likely used for surveillance to monitor police movements and coordinate escape routes. On the other side, social media exposed the scale of devastation in real time. Tourists in Puerto Vallarta posted videos of smoke rising from highways. Residents in Guadalajara live-streamed burning buses blocking intersections. Within hours, footage from dozens of attack sites was circulating on X, formerly Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. International news organizations aggregated the videos, and the world watched Mexico burn in real time. The government couldn't control the narrative because the evidence was everywhere, uploaded by hundreds of people with smartphones. This isn't the first time the CJNG has launched mass retaliation, but it's by far the most coordinated and destructive. In 2015, after the arrest of a regional leader, the cartel shot down a Mexican military helicopter with a rocket-propelled grenade, killing 9 people. In 2020, they conducted a series of blockades in Jalisco following the arrest of El Mencho's wife, burning vehicles across Guadalajara for several hours. But nothing in the CJNG's history compares to what's happening right now. The difference is the scale, the geographic reach, the precision, and the speed. This demonstrates that the CJNG has evolved from a regional criminal organization into a military-grade terrorist network capable of shutting down multiple Mexican states simultaneously. And here's what should terrify everyone. This could happen again. If Mexican authorities target another cartel leader, what's stopping the Sinaloa cartel, the Gulf cartel, or the Northeast cartel from doing the exact same thing? The CJNG just wrote the playbook for how to terrorize an entire nation in response to a leadership strike. Other cartels are watching. They're taking notes. And the message they received loud and clear is that the Mexican government cannot protect civilians when cartels decide to retaliate with overwhelming force. If you want to stay in the loop on how this situation develops and what it means for Mexico's future, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss critical updates on stories like this that are reshaping an entire country. So, what does this mean for Mexico's security going forward? It signals that the government's strategy of targeting cartel leadership, the so-called kingpin strategy, is fundamentally broken and potentially counterproductive. Yes, they killed El Mencho. Yes, they eliminated the most wanted criminal in Mexico. But the cost was 34 dead civilians, hundreds injured, over $1 billion in economic damage when you factor in business losses and tourism cancellations, and a nation paralyzed by fear. The CJNG is still operating. They're still smuggling fentanyl into the United States. They're still extorting businesses. They're still recruiting young men from impoverished communities. All the government did was make them more desperate, more violent, and more motivated to prove they cannot be defeated. Comment what you think. Does the Mexican government have any real control over cartel-dominated states like Jalisco, or are we watching the slow collapse of state authority in real time? Because honestly, the evidence suggests the cartels have more practical power than the government in large parts of Mexico. And we need to talk about what this means for ordinary Mexicans, because they're the ones who will continue paying the price. The wealthy can afford private security, they can relocate to safer cities or leave the country entirely. But working-class families don't have those options. They're trapped in neighborhoods controlled by cartels, forced to pay extortion fees to operate small businesses, watching their children get recruited into gangs because there are no other economic opportunities. They're the ones who can't afford to flee when violence erupts. They're the ones waiting in hospital emergency rooms with burned family members. They're the ones lining up at morgues to identify bodies. The human cost of Mexico's cartel war isn't measured just in death tolls. It's measured in the millions of people who live in constant fear, who've lost faith that their government can protect them, who've watched their communities descend into chaos while politicians make promises they can't keep. As of right now, February 25, 2026, the situation remains volatile. The CJNG has reduced the frequency of attacks over the past 24 hours, but Mexican intelligence warns that this could be a tactical pause rather than a permanent cessation. The cartel is likely regrouping, assessing the government's response, and planning next moves. There are reports that El-RR has called a meeting of regional CJNG commanders to consolidate his authority and determine the organization's strategy going forward. Meanwhile, rival cartels are watching closely. The Sinaloa cartel, which has been engaged in a brutal internal war between factions loyal to El Chapo's sons and those loyal to El Mayo Zambada, may see this as an opportunity to expand into CJNG territory while the organization is in transition. If that happens, Mexico could be facing a multi-cartel war across several states, a scenario that would make the current violence look manageable by comparison. The international implications are also significant. The United States has already issued a travel advisory warning American citizens to avoid Jalisco, Guanajuato, and Michoacán. The DEA released a statement yesterday describing the CJNG as the most dangerous criminal organization threatening U.S. national security and pledging continued cooperation with Mexican authorities. But there's growing frustration in Washington about Mexico's inability to control cartel violence. Some U.S. lawmakers are renewing calls for unilateral American military operations inside Mexico to target cartel leadership, a proposal that President Sheinbaum has categorically rejected as a violation of Mexican sovereignty. The tension between the two countries over how to address the cartel crisis is growing, and these latest attacks will only intensify that pressure. So, what's the path forward? Experts are divided. Some argue that Mexico needs to abandon the kingpin strategy entirely and focus on building institutional capacity, strengthening local police forces, reforming the judicial system, addressing the poverty and lack of opportunity that drives young people into cartel recruitment. Others argue that the only solution is overwhelming military force, treating cartels as terrorist organizations and waging total war until they're dismantled. Still others believe that the only realistic solution is negotiation and harm reduction, acknowledging that cartels cannot be eliminated and focusing instead on reducing violence and protecting civilians. There's no consensus, and in the meantime, people are dying. What's clear is that Mexico is at a crossroads. The death of El Mencho and the devastating revenge attacks that followed have exposed the brutal reality that many Mexicans have lived with for years. The government does not have meaningful control over large parts of the country. Cartels operate with near impunity in multiple states. They can shut down cities, terrorize civilian populations, and challenge the state's monopoly on violence without facing consequences that meaningfully degrade their operations. This isn't just a law enforcement problem anymore. This is a crisis of state legitimacy and governance. For the people of Jalisco and the other affected states, life is slowly attempting to return to normal, but the trauma remains. Schools are tentatively planning to reopen next week, but many parents are afraid to send their children. Businesses are assessing damage and trying to decide whether to rebuild or relocate. The military presence continues, but residents know that soldiers will eventually leave, and the cartels will still be there. Every person living in these areas now understands, in a visceral way, that this could happen again at any moment. That's the lasting legacy of these revenge attacks, not just the physical destruction, but the psychological terror that settles into communities and never fully leaves. As we continue to monitor this developing situation, one thing is certain: Mexico's cartel problem isn't going away. It's evolving, becoming more sophisticated, more violent, and more deeply embedded in the country's political and economic systems. The death of El Mencho won't end the CJNG. If anything, it may have made them more dangerous by creating internal competition and a desperate need to prove strength during a vulnerable transition. And if the government's response to that transition is more military operations targeting more cartel leaders, we could see this cycle of violence repeat across other states with other organizations. Maybe, just maybe, you'll like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on those notifications so you stay informed as this situation continues to develop. Because the truth is, what's happening in Mexico right now isn't just about cartels and drugs. It's about whether a nation can maintain its sovereignty and protect its citizens in the face of criminal organizations that operate like armies. Click another box on your screen to watch another video covering more stories about Mexico's ongoing struggle with organized crime and what it means for the region's future.